but I enjoy watching comedy, and I got to watch a little skit, and this skit was about a gentleman who owned a restaurant. He had a real nice, classy restaurant, and he was trying to really get big in the city that he lived. And he found out a food critic was coming to his restaurant. Big name food critic, but he didn't know what the food critic looked like or anything. So anyway, he knows the guy's coming. He's got the whole staff, the chefs, everybody ready to go. And he looks out the door, and there he is. And this man is determined, I am going to make sure that his dining experience is the best he's ever had. So he has the best steaks prepared and lobsters and the side dishes. And he is going out there, and there's 2 staff members making sure his drinks are filled and he's got plenty to eat. And he keeps asking, is everything okay? And the man's like, this is wonderful. This is wonderful. And they keep bringing him out more food. And he's like, hey, that's expensive. They said, don't worry. It's free of charge today. And the man is having the best dining experience he's ever had in his life. But in the meantime, because they're so focused on this gentleman, the other members of the restaurant, they're not getting the best quality service. They're sure not getting the best quality food. Everything was focused on this one man because he was so important. And at the end of his meal, he said, why are you treating me so good? And the man said, well, I just happened to find out that you were going to be here today. He said, really? You knew I was coming in for a dentist conference today? Come to find out, the food critic was the one over here not getting the top-notch service. Not getting the top-notch food. As a matter of fact, he was the guy being completely neglected. And it's really easy. It's really easy for us to prioritize some people over other people. Some we think's important. Some we think's beneficial to us. What can you do for me? That's the big question, right? When I lived in Miami, I lived down in Miami, Florida, that was one of the things that drove me crazy. People would not help others out. There was a man, and his truck was broke down and the hood was up, and he'd been over there for half an hour. Where I was working, I could see him. So I went over to him and I said, what's going on? He said, the battery's dead. I just need to jump. Unfortunately, I was on my motorcycle that day. And I was like, well, I can't give you a jump. I went to my coworkers and asked if they could. And those guys said, no, I won't do that. There was a man in a delivery van. I said, hey, could you give him a jump? They said, hey, this isn't my vehicle. I can't do that. There's a couple guys in big trucks there for construction. I said, hey, can you guys give him a jump? No, we're busy. I could not believe nobody would give this man a jump. But I'm going to tell you, one time here in Missouri, I was broke down on 65 highway, and there was a man who cut across all the traffic, and just to get over there, it was person after person. Hey, you need some help? Is everything okay? Over and over. And I just thinking, how much different is it? How much different is it if we just value every person and not look at them as if they're less than us or less than others, or ask the question, what's in it for me? Could you imagine if Jesus Christ came to this earth and the Bible said, for God so loved those who were worthy. God so loved those that were good enough. God so loved those that met a high enough standard that He gave His Son for them. That those that are worth something, if they'll believe in Him, they can have everlasting life. Could you imagine how different it would be if God treated us the same way? Let's look at these verses. We're in James chapter 2, starting in verse 1. It says, my brethren, have not the faith of our Lord Jesus Christ, the Lord of glory, with respect of persons? I mean, are you even considering the Lord when you look at other people? Are you considering the value that He puts in them when you see them? For if there come unto you and unto your assembly a man with a gold ring and goodly apparel, and there come also a poor man in vile raiment. Now think about this. You're throwing a little party. You're having a little get-together. Maybe you've invited everybody on your block or everybody in the city. Or maybe you've invited your family. And somebody comes and they're dressed right. They look good. Obviously, they've got a little bit of money because their jewelry is very expensive. They show up in their very nice car. They are proper. They look the part. They act the part. And one of the things I like to say, they even smell the part. They show up and everything is right. But here comes somebody, and you look at them, and you think, they don't really belong. They don't live on my block. They sure didn't get dressed up for this party. Matter of fact, they're probably here because they just want a handout, some free food. And you look at the two. It says, and you have respect for him that weareth the gay clothing, and say unto him, sit thou here in a good place. Right here in my recliner. Put your feet up. I'll get you some iced tea. You have a good time. Stand thou there or sit under my foot. So I skipped a little place. And say to the poor, stand there thou there outside my house. Or sit under my footstool. Have a seat right here on the floor. There's not really room for you. If you've judged the two of them, and this one gets a place of honor, and this one kind of gets cast to the side, are ye not then partial in yourselves, and are become judges of evil thoughts? Have you made a judgment on the value of a person, and you've decided that this person is worthy and this person is not good enough? Now, I would say us as Christians, we know better than to do that, don't we? I would imagine that if you went out and you were telling people about your church, Glendale Baptist Church, you would say, they're a really loving church. They're a great group of people. They are so inviting. They are so friendly. I would imagine that we know the things to say. But do we act the part? Do we act the way that our Lord would act when they come in here? And I'm going to be honest with you guys. It does me no good to stand up here and only tell you what you want to hear. The truth is, we've got a long way to go. Because if they come in and they look like they fit in, they are greeted well in this church. But if they don't, we'll tolerate them for a little while. We'll give them a chance to shape up. We'll give them the opportunity to find a way to fit in. But just a little while. Oh, but while you're here, make sure you sit where you belong. Make sure you act the way you should. And man, don't you dare go into those places or touch those things that you're not worthy of. Don't touch that piano. Don't go into that kitchen. Hey, your kid dropped a wrapper behind. And before you know it, if they don't immediately fit the part, we start condemning. Immediately fit the part. You've got a few weeks. But that's okay. Because there's a lot of people out there that they've been in churches and they know how to act, they know how to look, and that's who we want. When they're looking for a church, that's who we want. We want church people in our church. But what about all those around us that don't know Jesus? We'll give them a chance. We'll give them a chance. Guys, let's ask a serious question. Would Jesus be welcome here? That's kind of a cliche thing to say. It reminds me of a little joke. There was this little boy. He lived on the wrong side of the tracks. And he would walk by and he would see this beautiful church and he'd hear the beautiful music. And so many times he just thought, I'm going to go check that out. And he went and he crossed the tracks and he went into the church and he was greeted by one of the deacons at the door. And he said, young man, I think you've come to the wrong church. And he went and he crossed the railroad tracks and he was heading home and he was so overwhelmed. He just sat down and began to cry and a man walked up to him. And he said, what's wrong, young man? He said, I tried to go to that church, but they wouldn't let me in. And he looked up and Jesus was standing there and said, boy, I've been trying to get into that church for a long time. They won't let me in either. I could not imagine being a person who said, you're not welcome in the house of God. And then stand before my Lord and hear how much He loved them and how much He gave for them and how much He desired from them. And I was the one that rejected them. Now don't get me wrong. There's some people that are harder than others. There are some people that are harder than others. No doubt about it. Some people get under your skin, don't they? And I'll be honest with you. There's some people I just as soon kind of stay away from. But when it comes to serving the Lord, I pray that God will deal with this heart and help me get a little glimpse of the way that Jesus loves them and help me to serve them the way that He would. Would He be welcome in this? Let me read a verse to you. This is found in Isaiah 53. Jesus was rejected by the chosen people of God, by the way. You keep that in mind. Those that God chose, those super religious people, the people that acted the part, looked the part, smelt the part, those people rejected Jesus. It says, for he shall grow up before him as a tender plant and as a root out of the dry ground. He hath no form nor comeliness. And when we shall see him, there is no beauty that we should desire him. There is no beauty that we should desire him. What does that mean? The Son of God came to the earth. What would you expect? Man, this is God in the flesh. He's going to be big and stout and beautiful, wonderful, perfect. Everything that we look for, everything that we want. That's what they expected. And they got this man. There was nothing about him. There was nothing about him that made him stand out as anything special. And they said, there's no way that this guy's good enough. He doesn't add up. And they rejected him. They said he wasn't worthy, he wasn't good enough. They refused to believe that this could be the Son of God. Is this not the carpenter's son? I mean, if God's going to send His Son to this earth, surely it's going to be the son of a king or somebody important. He's just a carpenter's son. Is not His mother called Mary? The young girl? There's nothing important or special about her. As a matter of fact, I heard a rumor she got pregnant out of wedlock. Keep that in mind. And his brethren, James and Joseph and Simon and Judas. What's so special about these guys? What's so important about them? Are you kidding me? This is a man that works with his hands. I mean, look at him. I shook his hand the other day, and his hands are all hard and calloused up. And Mary and James, God wouldn't pick them. They're not of a good enough bloodline. They're not special enough. They're not important enough. I can't believe it. I can't believe that would be the family that God would pick. And they turned their back on Jesus because He did not meet the standard they were looking for. So I kind of wonder. I think about this. I think about these things. If Jesus was born about 30 years ago, and He grew up in this culture, how well received would He be by this church? Let's continue on reading. Hearken, my beloved brethren, hath not God chosen the poor of this world rich in faith, and heirs of the kingdom which He hath promised to them that love Him? Could you imagine if we're going to judge people, that the standard we would set is how they love the Lord? And if we judge this one and say, man, that one really loves the Lord and is doing well, and we judge this one and say, this one obviously does not have any relationship with the Lord, then what should we do? You know what I would do? You know what I try to do? I try to say, that one's amazing. They love the Lord. But this is the one that needs my attention. This is the one I need to show love and compassion to. It's easy to do it to this one. And I will show love and compassion to that one who loves the Lord. But this one over here that's real rough around the edges kind of gets on my nerves a little bit. This one. That's the one I'm on my knees praying for. That's the one my heart's burdened for. Because that's the one that Christ came. He came for this one too. But Christ came to save this one. This is the one that when Christ sees, He is moved with compassion, as if they're a sheep without a shepherd. That's the one that Christ is desperate for. But ye have despised the poor. Do not rich men oppress you and draw you before the judgment seats? Now let's put this into Christian context just a little bit. Let's put it into church context when we see, have not the rich oppressed you? I find it interesting how we can pick a person and we can put value into them and we can put them in a position of authority, and it goes to their head, and the next thing you know, they're not very Christ-like with people around them. They become very judgmental. You don't meet my standard, you're not good enough. You didn't teach that well enough, or you didn't sing well enough, or you didn't pray well enough, or you didn't make that dish well enough. And here's what we do. And I am calling you out if you do this. We go around to everybody else and we make sure that everybody else knows our opinion of them. We make sure everybody knows this is what they did to offend me. But here's what happens, guys. We get to where it's so normal to us to complain in secret that we forget to be cautious. And we start speaking out where people are around to hear. and we let others know what we really think of that individual, and other people overhear it, or maybe even the people themselves, and they get to hear how this person in the church who's supposed to love the Lord really feels about them. And then they don't feel welcome anymore. And then they leave. I will tell you, there is nothing that upsets me more as a pastor than when I get a hold of somebody I haven't seen in 3 or 4 weeks and say, hey, I'm just checking on you. Is everything okay? Are you sick? Did something happen? And they said, oh, well, I overheard what so-and-so said about me. In the church, in the kitchen, in the Sunday school room. I heard the way they talked about me. And I don't feel welcome at that church anymore. There's nothing that upsets me more than investing time and effort and prayer into leading somebody to the Lord, and somebody in my church decides they're not worthy of it, and they run them out the door. Somebody has decided on behalf of the church that the only ones welcome here are the ones that are of good quality. And everybody else would rather just keep away. I'd rather have 30 pretty people than 100 ugly people at my church. That was the perfect time for that. I don't know whose ringtone that was. Sometimes I feel that way. Give me the pretty ones that act right. Give me the ones that like the hymns. Give me the ones that fix their hair and dress up. I'd rather have just 30. And I want to know all their names. Because I don't want to be burdened by that one. Their hair is a mess. They don't smell right. Their kids are loud. Something else. I'll tell you a little story. I wasn't even planning on telling this one. I'll tell you a little story. Not at this church. This is a church I used to pastor. This family came in. This family had 3 girls and 1 boy. And the 3 girls were the older ones, and the boy was by far the youngest. And I'm going to tell you, those 3 girls were 3 of the best behaved girls you've ever seen in your life. They would sit down and they would be quiet and they'd smile and they were friendly and they'd shake your hand, but they were proper. Just what you wanted. But that little boy was rowdy as he could be. The dad got up to play guitar, and the son went running up there and jumped on his back and almost tackled him while he was playing guitar at the church. Man, one of my deacons, furious. So that boy needs to be taken out behind the woodshed. That was his expression. Anybody ever been taken out behind the woodshed? And I don't necessarily disagree with them. I'm going to tell you something. If Avery were to come up here right now and jump on my back, I'm taking him out behind the woodshed. I don't disagree with them. But I told them. I said, do you see how those little girls behave? Oh yeah, they're wonderful. I said, he's had a chance to teach them. But did you see when he jumped on his dad's back? Did you see the dad correct him? Did you see the mom come take him by the hand and sit him down? Did you see they're teaching him? They're working on him. No, unfortunately, that family did not get it figured out well enough. And a few comments were made to them and they never came back. True story. Never came back. But ye have despised the poor, those that don't fit in, those that are not right, those that are not desired. Do not rich men oppress you? They move into positions of authority, and they do things the way that you want. They do things right, and the next thing you know, it kind of becomes an idol. Next thing you know, what their service is becomes more important than people. I say this without hesitation. I would rather this whole place burn down and more souls get saved than to have this church and people not get saved as a result. I've said it before, I will say it again, I mean it. There is nothing in this church that is more valuable than people.